Hello, how you guys doing? James here on another nice evening before the coldness get here into Ohio and western eastern states. Well, I got another video. This time, this is gonna be interesting. I don't know what's coming over a certain demographic of people, particularly. It's a kind of touchy subject about black and white, but it is good. This could be a start. This is a good case. There are white people, some white people. I don't know what it is, but they come and speaking the truth, and it's going to blow your mind. But let's start with a well-known woman that's been trying to educate people on racism. She's a little white woman from, I would call Miss Jane Elliott. Miss Jane, let her take it away.
Investing in real estate makes sense, but where do you start?
White people are scared to death right now, particularly white males. They're scared to death that they are going to lose their power in the future. And they are. But if you want to get ready for the future, if you want to be treated well in the future, treat others well in the present.
Call me Louis. This is my sport. Louis James. So this is Jane Elliott, a diversity trainer and a human rights activist. We've seen her before on this channel as she was speaking about racism and the true sizes of maps, why they're not drawn proportional to the different geographical areas. So in this clip today we see her speak about why whites in America are so scared of black people, particularly white males. So let's take a look at this.
Victor Hugo said, "No force on earth can stop an idea whose time has come." The idea of one race, the human race, is an idea whose time has come. We are not going to be able to stop it no matter what they do. They can elect Trump after Trump after Trump, and that will not stop the idea that there's only one race on the face of the earth. It's the human race, and we are all members of it. You and I are cousins. Now, if you don't like being my cousin, that's too bad for you. But we are all in the same family. We are members of the family of man.
You say that all whites are racist. Can you expound on that?
Any white person who was born, raised, and schooled in the United States of America, if you aren't a racist, you're a miracle. Either that or you decided to educate yourself. Because education in this country is about white is right, brown's all right, black's got to stand back. Yellow's mellow, but whites, we educate in a way that says that white males have done all the adventures, have made all the adventures, have done all the discovering, have made everything that is good and has been accomplished according to social studies, which is actually anti-social studies, by white males. It's a lie. But we do that in order to maintain the myth of white superiority. The myth of race has to be maintained at all costs in this country. Because if white people have to give up the color of their skin as being something that makes them perfect, what do they have left? If we start teaching the truth about history, if we start teaching about Nile Valley contributions to civilization, it will totally change the way we conduct ourselves in the classroom. It will have to. Columbus didn't discover America. You can't discover a place where people are already living. But we celebrate that every October. It's a lie. We need to get over it. We need to stop telling the myths and start telling the truth.
Most people will say, I'm not racist.
I'm not a racist. Why, some of my best friends are black. Yeah, and then you say, name one. Or this one, I don't see color. And when some woman says to me, I don't see color, I say, I knew that. If you saw color, you wouldn't dye your hair that way. Or I say, if you saw color, you wouldn't wear that shirt with those pants. I believe that you don't see color. It's an attempt to deny skin color. And it's an attempt to deny what's wrong with seeing the color of my skin. Is it all right for you to see me kind of pink? That's okay for me. I don't mind. And I suspect that you don't mind being seen the color you are. You have a right to be what you are. And until people in this country and people in this world get it into their heads that the first modern human beings that evolved on this earth were black women. They evolved in sub-Saharan Africa about 280,000 years ago, and every human being on the face of the earth today has the memory of those black women's genetic structure in their genes. Now, we don't want to admit that, but that's the way it is. And as people moved farther and farther from the equator, their bodies produced less and less melanin, so their hair, their skin, and their eyes got lighter. As they moved into the east, they ate a lot of fish and a lot of vegetables, so their skin took on a different tone. I found that out when I was raising little kids. My husband worked in a supermarket. He was the head of the produce department. And they had lots of oranges that they couldn't sell, so he'd bring them home. And I was feeding my kids orange juice like you never saw in your life. They began to have an orange cast to their skin. I thought they had a liver problem. So I took her to the doctor, and she said, "What are you feeding these kids?" I said, "Well, lots of orange juice." She said, "Stop it if you want them to stop being orange." Now, if you think that skin color isn't anything other than the body's natural reaction to the natural environment, get over it.
If all white people are racist, according to you, can they be reprogrammed?
Of course they can. Of course they can. Of course they can be. It's called education. I'm an educator. The word educator comes from the root dus, which means lead, the prefix e, which means out, the suffix ate, which means the act of, and the suffix or, which means one who does. An educator is one who is engaged in the act of leading people out of ignorance. Now, I know you can change them. The second year I did the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise in my classroom, it was filmed by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. They gave me a copy of that film. I showed it to my father. My father was about 59 years old at the time. He's been a farmer all his life. He raised six kids, lost one, raised six. Watched that film as a 59-year-old man. When it was over, he stood up, and with tears in his eyes, he took his red handkerchief out of the back pocket of his overalls, his bib overalls, and said, "I wish somebody had taught me that when I was 9 years old." Nobody had dare say to me, "This doesn't work. This is too harsh. This isn't necessary. You can't teach an old dog new tricks because they're wrong." You can teach an old dog new tricks. You can teach people to give up the myth of racism. Somebody taught the Greeks to give up the myth that the sun was a god in a golden chariot that went across the sky every morning. They believed that for hundreds of years. We have believed the myth of 3 or 4 races, different races in this country, for long enough. There's no such thing as reverse racism. You can only be a racist if you have the power to institutionalize what you're doing to people who are different from you. What we're calling reverse racism is natural reaction to being treated unfairly on the basis of somebody else's ignorance. Now, don't ever let anybody say to you or about anyone around you that people don't like that person because of the color of their skin. That isn't the reason white people don't like people of color. They don't like people of color because they don't understand about skin color. And they don't understand that we all are descendants of somebody who looked like your mother. You don't really want to get me started on this because
I do want to get you started.
I'm really angry about how we are miseducating the American mind.
In your exercises, in order for them to see the light, or is there another way?
It's necessary to do what we do in offices and in the military and in schools and colleges and in hospitals and in community groups all the time. What we do is we become our parent ego. We go into our parent ego state, and that forces all those we're working with into their child ego state. And if you watch our so-called president, he spends most of his time either in his child or his parent ego state. He never gets into his adult ego state unless he's reading off the teleprompter. And he is such a poor reader that oftentimes he makes mistakes, and then he is instantly in his child ego state right in front of your very eyes. It's absolutely fascinating to watch it happen. God created human beings, the human race, and they started out black women. White people created racism. Human beings created racism. It's time to get over it.
A lot of people have criticized former President Obama was not speaking out on race enough. Do you think he failed in that?
What if he had spoken out enough on race? Imagine what would have happened to him. The man is still alive. Do you remember Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? Do you remember Malcolm X? Do you remember all those people have been killed not because of the color of their skin, but because of the fear of white people, that someone who isn't white is going to look better, sound better, act better, do better than they do. Mr. Obama was the president of all of us. He wasn't just the president of black people. He was the president of all of us. The man who's there now is and claims to be the president of the people who look like him. When he says, "Make America great again," what he's really saying is, "Make America hate again." You need to realize that it is not the intent of white people to let this situation change. in favor of anyone but themselves. And right now, white people are really frightened. If you don't understand the destruction of Planned Parenthood offices, and you don't understand the wall that we're going to build on the southern border of the United States, you haven't read the book The Birth Dearth by Ben Wattenberg. Ben Wattenberg was a brilliant Jewish man who was a member of the American Enterprise Institute, and he wrote a book, the first paragraph of which says, "The main problem confronting the United States today is there aren't enough white babies being born in this country." He was an advisor to presidents of the United States. He wrote the book in 1987. He says if we don't change this and change it rapidly, white people will lose their numerical majority in this country, and this will no longer be a white man's land. Now, I'm not misrepresenting this. I'm telling you almost exactly what he says. He says there are three things we can do to solve this. Number one, we could pay women to have babies, as they have been doing in Western European nations for years. Then he says, and these are his words, not mine, unfortunately, we would have to pay women of all colors to have babies, so we don't want to do that. He says the second thing we could do is increase the number of legal immigrants that are allowed into this country every year. Then once again he says, unfortunately, the vast majority of those wanting to come to this country today are people of color, so we don't want to do that. The third thing he says, and women had better pay attention to this, 60% of the fetuses that are aborted every year are white. If we could keep that 60% alive, that would solve our birth dearth. Does that sound like racism to you? And if it doesn't, I want to know why it doesn't. If it doesn't, you don't understand what racism is. And I think it does. When we close Planned Parenthood clinics because we think they're there only for abortion, we need to take another look. They are used for many, many, many things, and many women need the things that they can get from Planned Parenthood clinics. But we are willing to do away with all that good to avoid allowing white women to have control of their own bodies. White people are scared to death right now, particularly white males. They're scared to death that they are going to lose their power in the future. And they are. But if you want to get ready for the future, if you want to be treated well in the future, treat others well in the present. What we do in the present constructs the future. What we have done in the past, we can learn from that. And we'd better learn from that. Those who forget the mistakes of the past are doomed to repeat them. And when you read this book, you'll realize that that's exactly what we're doing. We're repeating the mistakes that we have made in the past because we aren't teaching about these mistakes in the present. We are not teaching history that is true. We aren't teaching social studies that is true. We aren't even teaching true geography, for God's sake. You want to talk about forgiveness? You want to talk about changing this thing? I cannot understand how Japanese people can stand the sight of any of us, and yet they do. I cannot understand why black people who have been subjected to the ugliness that they've been subjected to in this country can get up every morning and go to work among us and not be absolutely furious. And I don't understand why we allow white people to behave the way they do. We have got to stop tolerating the intolerable. If it's intolerable for my black cousins, and every black person on this earth is one of my cousins, if it's intolerable for them, it's intolerable for me. I will not tolerate it. I will not tolerate it. I am required not to tolerate that kind of treatment for the people who are related to me. And that's every person on the face of the earth. If your ignorance is such that you will mistreat somebody because of your ignorance about the color of their skin, don't do it around me. Number one, I've been threatened with death lots of times. Now I say, go for it, fool. My husband died 4 years ago. Being with him would not be a bad thing for me. Death is not the worst thing that can happen to you. Living a worthless, useless life is much worse than dying.
Are you a low-income American on food stamps or Medicaid? If so, you are now eligible.
In our world, the color of your skin should never determine your worth or opportunities in life. But unfortunately, a deeply ingrained system known as white privilege continues to influence the destinies of individuals, often regardless of their intelligence, talents, or contributions to society. White privilege is like an invisible hand that guides the course of our lives, impacting everything from everyday encounters to life-altering moments. It's the unsettling reality that people of color, especially black individuals, are more likely to be stopped by law enforcement, face harsher penalties, or even lose their lives in encounters that their white counterparts navigate with relative ease. It's the unspoken biases that can make it undeniably harder for black individuals to secure loans or find stable employment. Education, too, is marred by this systemic imbalance, with black students often facing obstacles that hinder their access to quality schooling and higher education. Even seemingly unrelated areas like insurance premiums, employment prospects, and societal acceptance are influenced by this pervasive privilege. It affects the way media portrays different racial groups, the underrepresentation of people of color in politics, and the lack of diversity in leadership roles across various industries. In this video, we aim to shine a light on the profound impact of white privilege, exposing the harsh realities faced by black individuals and communities. While the world claims we are all equal, systematic racism and white privilege continues to loom over us all. Also, as a way of supporting our efforts, hit the like button of the video, share, and subscribe to help the channel grow. Your support means a lot to us. White privilege, or white skin privilege, is the societal privilege that benefits white people over non-white people in some societies, particularly if they are otherwise under the same social, political, or economic circumstances. With roots in European colonialism and imperialism and the Atlantic slave trade, white privilege has developed in circumstances that have broadly sought to protect white racial privileges, various national citizenships, and other rights or special benefits. The phrase white privilege was first coined by activist and scholar Peggy McIntosh in 1988 in her paper White Privilege: Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. She described white privilege in terms of the unspoken advantage that the dominant culture has over people of color. In other words, power, benefits, and other advantages are distributed in unequal ways among the different groups in society. Specifically, with respect to white privilege, the advantage rests with white people. Though some people might deny the existence of white privilege, there are many instances where it exists and continues to hinder the lifestyle of black individuals and communities. White privilege in police interactions. White privilege manifests itself in various ways when it comes to interactions with the police. It often means the difference between a peaceful encounter and a potentially life-threatening situation, especially when we examine real-life examples of black unarmed individuals who have been unjustly shot, killed, or brutalized by law enforcement officers. A simple case as a traffic stop could easily turn deadly for a black person, even if they committed no crime and obeyed the police to the letter. The case of Philando Castile is one of the best examples of white privilege and how black people are more likely to meet their end during encounters with the police. On July 6, 2016, Philando Castile, a black man, was pulled over for a broken taillight in Minnesota. Despite complying with the officer's instructions and informing him that he had a legal firearm, Castile was shot by the officer in front of his girlfriend and her child. Geronimo Yanez, which was the police officer who pulled the trigger, would walk free regardless of the fact that he ended a man's life without cause. While this sounds tragic, it gets even worse. In New York City, the stop and frisk policy led to a significant number of black and Latino individuals being stopped without reasonable suspicion, resulting in tense encounters and racial profiling. Things are no way better for individuals with mental health crises when meeting with the police. White individuals experiencing mental health crises are more likely to receive compassionate treatment or intervention, while black individuals may face escalated confrontations. The case of Elijah McClain comes to mind. On August 24, 2019, Elijah McClain, a young black man in Colorado, was approached by police while walking home. Despite being unarmed and posing no threat, he was placed in a chokehold, injected with a sedative, and later died. The stories get even depressing when you come to know that white individuals arrested for nonviolent offenses, such as drug possession, may receive more lenient treatment from the criminal justice system. In case of black people, it is a horrific experience. The tragic story of Khalif Browder is a perfect example. Khalif Browder, a black teenager, was arrested in New York City for allegedly stealing a backpack. Unable to make bail, he spent 3 years in pretrial detention at Rikers Island, where he faced brutal conditions. His case was eventually dismissed, but the trauma led to his tragic suicide. When it comes to the use of violence, white individuals are less likely to experience excessive use of force by the police during arrests or confrontations. For black people, a spot in the grave is more likely. Eric Garner, a black man, died in New York City after being placed in a chokehold by a police officer while repeatedly stating, "I can't breathe." His death sparked nationwide protests and calls for justice. These real-life examples underscore the deeply rooted disparities in the treatment of black individuals by law enforcement, highlighting the deadly consequences of racial bias and the privilege that often shields white individuals from similar outcomes. White privilege in education. White privilege in the realm of education and schooling often translates into unequal opportunities and systemic biases that can profoundly impact the lives of black individuals. In the U.S., white students are more likely to attend well-funded schools with access to advanced courses, experienced teachers, and extracurricular activities. This stems from decades of Jim Crows and discrimination experienced by black people in the 19th and 20th centuries, preventing them from accessing quality education. In fact, Ruby Bridges, a black 6-year-old, became the first African-American child to attend an all-white elementary school in New Orleans in 1960. She faced intense racial hostility, including being taught in a separate classroom, despite her academic potential. It's just not being able to attend quality schools, but the tests are also a trap for black students. Standardized tests can be culturally biased, disadvantaging black students who may not have access to test preparation resources. In the U.S., standardized tests like the SAT and ACT have been criticized for perpetuating racial disparities in college admissions, as they may not accurately reflect the potential of black students. Despite the criticisms, nothing has been done and the disparities still remain. Even when being disciplined, white and black students get a different response. White students are less likely to face harsh disciplinary measures such as suspension or expulsion for similar infractions compared to their black peers. In 2019, a 6-year-old black girl, Kaya Roll in Florida, was arrested and handcuffed for a minor tantrum at school, raising concerns about the over-policing of black students. While being dragged out like a criminal, Kaya begged a school resource officer for a second chance as her tiny wrists were zip-tied and she was escorted out of Lucius and Emma Nixon Academy. Kaya was taken into custody after she reportedly threw a temper tantrum that was triggered because of her sleep apnea, a condition that the school was well aware of and makes her irritable during the day. After the arrest, Kaya developed extreme separation anxiety. She would wake up screaming with night terrors and wet her bed until she had to move into her grandmother's room to finally fall asleep. While this sounds tragic, this is not the only case. Taylor Bracey, who was 16 years old, was seen in a video being body slammed by a school resource officer at Liberty High School in Kissimmee, Florida. Like Kaya, Bracey's mother has publicly said that her daughter is traumatized and has suffered from side effects from the incident, including memory loss, headaches, and blurry vision. These aren't isolated incidents. This is part of a pattern of violence that black students have been experiencing for years. Research shows black students are more likely to be perceived as an adult compared with their white counterparts and face harsher punishments in school. This way in which black student behaviors are read as provocative or dangerous or problematic when their counterparts of other racial ethnic groups are not perceived this way. And a lot of that has to do with the historical tropes and stereotypes associated with being black that present a particular risk for black students. Black students are not just treated worse overall, but teachers also have low expectations for them in the future. White students often benefit from positive stereotypes and higher expectations from teachers, while black students may face negative stereotypes and lower academic expectations. Malcolm X, a human rights activist who was a prominent figure during the civil rights movement, is a perfect example. Malcolm attended West Junior High School in Lansing and then Mason High School in Mason, Michigan, but left high school in 1941 before graduating. He excelled in junior high school but dropped out of high school after a white teacher told him that practicing law, his aspiration at the time, was no realistic goal for a Negro. Later, Malcolm X recalled feeling that the white world offered no place for a career-oriented black man, regardless of talent. These examples illustrate how systemic racism and white privilege can shape educational experiences and outcomes for black individuals. White privilege in employment. White privilege often extends its influence into the realm of employment, job opportunities, and labor practices. White job applicants are less likely to face biases in hiring decisions, benefiting from assumptions of competence and qualifications. In fact, sending CVs with traditionally white-sounding names receive 50% more callbacks for interviews than those with names perceived as black, even when qualifications were identical. despite laws against discrimination, affirmative action, a degree of employer enlightenment, and the desire by some businesses to enhance profits by hiring those most qualified regardless of race, African Americans are twice as likely as whites to be unemployed, and they earn nearly 25% less when they are employed. 2 decades ago, a black woman named Kalisha White applied for a team leader position at Target and worried that her application had been ignored because of her race. So she sent it back in with a different name and slightly fewer qualifications. That application got her an interview. Eventually, she won a class action lawsuit against the massive retailer to test whether employers might discriminate against job applicants with black-sounding names. Associate professors of economics Marianne Bertrand with Chicago's Graduate School of Business and Sendil Mullainathan with MIT conducted an elaborate experiment. They fabricated resumes for multiple phantom job seekers with common black and white names. The professors then sent out nearly 5,000 resumes for 1,300 job openings advertised in newspapers and on online job sites throughout Chicago and Boston. Most job openings for which the researchers sent resumes were administrative, sales, clerical, and managerial positions. Bertrand and Mullainathan randomly assigned the applicants' names common to either black men, black women, white men, or white women, and were careful not to send identical resumes to the same employer. Bertrand and Mullainathan then tracked which of their applicants were called for job interviews. Bertrand said that more resumes were sent to Chicago area employers simply because it is the larger metropolitan area, but added that the rate for interview requests was virtually identical between the two cities. The results were a bit disturbing. Applicants with white-sounding names were 50% more likely to be contacted for job interviews than those with typical black names. There were no significant differences between the rates at which men and women were contacted. The results indicate large racial differences in callback rates to a phone line with a voicemail box attached and a message recorded by someone of the appropriate race and gender. Job applicants with white names needed to send about 10 resumes to get one callback. Those with African American names needed to send around 15 resumes to get one callback. This would suggest either employer prejudice or employer perception that race signals lower productivity. While this study was done in 2003, new research finds that employers aren't treating identical resumes equally and job applicants with black names still less likely to get interviews. In 2021, researchers from the University of California, Berkeley, and the University of Chicago sent 83,000 fictitious applications for entry-level job postings to 108 Fortune 500 employers, using randomly assigned and racially distinctive names. They found that applicants with black names were called back 10% fewer times across the board, and even less when it came to specific companies, despite having comparable applications to their white counterparts. It's not just getting a job that is difficult. Climbing up the corporate ladder is near impossible for black people. White employees often have a higher likelihood of receiving promotions and being considered for leadership roles within organizations. Ursula Burns, the first black woman to lead a Fortune 500 company, Xerox, faced considerable challenges in breaking through the corporate glass ceiling despite her qualifications. She would go on to inspire black people everywhere, becoming a beacon of hope and success. Another crucial aspect of this labor market inequality is the significant pay gap between black and white workers. In 2019, the median black worker earned 24.4% less per hour than their white counterpart. What's even more concerning is that this wage gap has increased over the years, surpassing the gap observed in 1979. Even when adjusting for education, experience, and regional disparities, a substantial unexplained wage gap of 14.9% remained in 2019. This is up from 8.6% in 1979, indicating that there's more to this wage gap than meets the eye. Moreover, this issue is even more pronounced among men compared to women. These racial wage disparities have continued to grow, even in a broader context of rising wage inequality. Black workers have seen fewer benefits from overall increases in productivity compared to their white counterparts. Between 1979 and 2019, while net productivity per hour increased significantly, median wages only grew modestly. The median wage for black workers grew even more slowly during this period, highlighting a troubling trend. Various economic theories have been proposed to explain these disparities, including human capital theory, models of discrimination based on personal preferences, and statistical models of discrimination. However, none of these theories provide a complete and satisfactory explanation for the enduring racial disparities in unemployment and pay. Despite a wealth of empirical evidence and a historical record that underscores the role of discrimination, there is still ongoing debate within the field of economics regarding the interpretation of these disparities. These instances underscore the systemic disparities rooted in white privilege that continue to shape employment practices, job opportunities, and labor dynamics.
And that's why your Ron DeSantis, your Cheryl Huckabees, and people like that, that's why they don't want this information being put out there. And they want to keep the status quo like that. They want to keep white privilege. That's why even Viva, with that guy named Swami, whatever his name, he wants to keep it like that. So it doesn't matter. Even though he's considered a brown person, it don't mean nothing.
Despite their qualifications and abilities, black individuals often face significant barriers to career advancement and economic equality. White privilege in housing and loans. White privilege can manifest significantly in housing, insurance, and loan processes, leading to disparities in access and opportunities. White individuals are often more likely to have access to housing in desirable neighborhoods, while black individuals may face housing discrimination and exclusion from predominantly white areas. The practice of redlining in the United States historically denied black families access to loans and housing in certain neighborhoods, perpetuating racial segregation. Such practices have long-lasting effects on housing disparities. Black inner-city neighborhoods were most likely to be redlined. Investigations found that lenders would make loans to lower-income white borrowers but not to middle or upper-income African Americans. Unable to get regular mortgages, black residents who wanted to own a house often were forced to resort to exploitatively priced housing contracts that massively increased the cost of housing and gave them no equity until their last payment was delivered. While there have been laws passed to prevent redlining and put an end to the practice, the effects can still be seen today. White individuals are more likely to become homeowners, benefiting from the wealth accumulation associated with property ownership. A study by the Urban Institute found that the homeownership gap between white and black Americans widened over the past few decades with significant disparities in wealth accumulation. Since the housing bust and Great Recession, the homeownership gap between black and white households has widened to its largest level in 50 years. Between 2010 and 2017, according to the American Community Survey, the gap increased from 28.1 percentage points in 2010 to 30.2 percentage points in 2017. Over this period, the homeownership rate for white households fell from 72.6% to 71.9%, while the rate for black households declined 2.7 percentage points to 41.8%. When it comes to even starting a business, white individuals typically have greater access to loans and financial services, including business loans and investment opportunities, while black entrepreneurs often struggle to secure loans and funding for their businesses, facing systemic barriers that limit their economic opportunities. This is one of the reasons for the wealth gap among black and white households. These examples highlight how systemic racism and white privilege affect housing and loan processes, leading to disparities in access and outcomes. Despite their qualifications and financial stability, black individuals may face significant obstacles and discrimination in these areas. White privilege in the criminal justice system. White privilege can be evident in the criminal justice system, affecting how individuals are treated, convicted, and sentenced. White individuals are less likely to be wrongfully convicted of crimes they did not commit, as they may face less scrutiny and bias during investigations. The case of the Central Park Five, which involved 5 black and Latino teenagers wrongfully convicted, comes to mind. When Trisha May Lee's body was discovered in New York City's Central Park early in the morning on April 20th, 1989, she had been so badly beaten and repeatedly defiled that she remained in a coma for nearly 2 weeks and retained no memory of the attack. The brutal assault of the 28-year-old white investment banker, who had been out for a jog the night before, led to widespread public outcry and the quick arrest and subsequent conviction of 5 black and Latino teens: Antron McCray, 15, Kevin Richardson, 15, Yusuf Salam, as the Central Park Five, but in 2002,
This
Won't
kingdom.
even do it.
Keep it healthy and thrive.
16, who came to be known as the Central Park Five, but in 2002, after serving sentences that ranged from 6 to 13 years for what then New York City Mayor Ed Koch called the crime of the century, new DNA evidence and a confession proved convicted offender Matias Reyes was the true lone culprit. The charges against the five men were vacated and they eventually received a $41 million settlement. Even when white individuals are convicted, they often receive more lenient sentences for similar crimes compared to their black counterparts. The affluenza case that involved a white teenager, Ethan Couch, is a perfect example of white privilege in play, even when it involves heinous crimes. Ethan Couch, a white teenager from a wealthy family, was involved in a drunk driving incident in 2013 that resulted in the deaths of 4 people. During his trial, the defense argued that Couch should not be held fully responsible for his actions due to his affluent upbringing and a term coined as affluenza, suggesting that his rich background shielded him from understanding the consequences of his actions.
Wow.
Couch received a controversial sentence of 10 years of probation and therapy, rather than a harsher punishment like incarceration. Many critics argued that his sentence was an example of white privilege, as they believed a person from a less privileged background would have received a more severe punishment for similar actions. The case sparked a broader conversation about disparities in the criminal justice system, particularly how race and socioeconomic factors can impact sentencing and outcomes in legal cases. It raised questions about whether individuals from marginalized communities would receive similar leniency in the justice system. While the term affluenza was widely criticized and not recognized as a formal mental health diagnosis, the case itself became a symbol of the intersection between privilege, race, and the legal system in the United States. While white offenders get a slap on the wrist and are less likely to receive the death penalty compared to black defendants, even for similar crimes, black offenders could be looking at the death penalty even if there are doubts that they committed the crime. The case of Troy Davis garnered international attention when he was executed in Georgia, despite significant doubts about his guilt. Davis was executed for the execution of a police officer, a crime he always maintained he did not commit. In the months before his execution, people around the country urged Georgia to reconsider in light of the serious doubts about his guilt, including the fact that 7 out of 9 witnesses recanted their testimony against him. Despite calls to stay his execution from politicians on both sides of the aisle, the NAACP, the Innocence Project, and Amnesty International, the state moved ahead with Davis's execution. When it comes to second chances, white individuals are also at the top of it. White individuals may benefit more from post-conviction legal reforms, such as reduced sentences or parole, compared to black individuals with similar convictions. The case of Cyntoia Brown, a black woman who was sentenced to life in prison for executing a man who had solicited her for intercourse when she was a minor, led to calls for criminal justice reform and a reconsideration of her sentence. Cyntoia Brown was just 16 when she was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of a man she claims bought her for intercourse. The homeless runaway had been in and out of the juvenile justice system, survived multiple defilement and assaults, and was forced into intercourse slavery by her then boyfriend, a pimp known as Cutthroat, who regularly sold her for drug money. Yet few details of Brown Long's troubled childhood were heard by the Tennessee court in 2004, which instead repeatedly described her as a teen call girl and tried her as an adult. It took the influence of celebrities like Kim Kardashian, Rihanna, and LeBron James to force Tennessee to re-examine its own unusually harsh juvenile sentencing laws, which require under 18s convicted of first-degree murder to face 51 years behind bars before a chance of parole. Brown was later released at the age of 31 years old. Before her petition for clemency was granted, Brown Long would not have been eligible for parole until she was 69. These examples demonstrate how systemic racism and white privilege can influence the outcomes of criminal cases, leading to disparities in convictions and sentencing. Overall, white privilege is a deeply ingrained issue in our society that continues to undermine the lives of black individuals, regardless of their intelligence and contributions to society. It's a painful reality that the color of one's skin can significantly impact their life outcomes, from from education to employment, encounters with law enforcement, and access to essential services like loans and insurance. This pervasive issue doesn't just affect individuals. It perpetuates systemic inequalities that persist in our communities. It's reflected not only in our daily lives, but also in media, politics, and various aspects of society. It's essential for all of us to acknowledge and address white privilege actively. By doing so, we can work towards a more equitable society where people are judged based on their abilities, character, and contributions, rather than the color of their skin. Our collective responsibility is to challenge and change the systems that sustain white privilege, striving for a world where everyone has an equal opportunity to thrive and succeed. In the end, let's build a society where a person's worth isn't tied to their skin color, but to their humanity and potential. This brings us to the end of this video. Tell us what you think in the comment section, as we are always interested in your thoughts.
I went from zero to over $1 million in online publishing in 5 years. There is no better business to start than publishing. The best thing
Pose the question, why do white people hate black people so much? I have been in situations where I've been surrounded by nothing but white people, and this conversation has come up. The race conversation has come up, and no one ever has an actual reason as to why they hate black people. There's always these, oh, black on black crime, oh, they're lazy, oh, they're this, but it's not actually, there's no legitimacy behind their reasoning. It's just that they've heard and they're regurgitating. And so, long story short, it really comes down to there is no reason. It's a deep-seated jealousy, a deep-seated hate that, you know, black people exude greatness. Black people are the great inventors. Black people are the beginning of the human race, the Eve gene. And white people have worked so hard to erase the history and erase the greatness of the black race, down to even when things are invented, the majority of things that are invented were invented by a black person. But yet the white race has actually erased the original inventor from history and have put their names on things that they had no business putting their names on.
It's weird to be a race that acts inhumane but pushes the narrative on another race. This is one of the many insidious ways white supremacy culture shows up in those of us that are white-bodied individuals. And I say insidious because it's only subtle to us, but very plain to see for black and brown indigenous people of color. When we're convinced that we are not and consider ourselves to be safe and benevolent white folks who don't see color, we are so dangerous. Because underneath all that and color blindness lies some very foundational beliefs about what it means to be a good person in this world. And what do you know, all those characteristics just so happen to look like what it means to be white. We have to recognize that we have been raised in and therefore conditioned to think in terms of a racial caste system. So as long as black and brown indigenous people of color are able to assimilate into whiteness, they're okay, and even heralded as exceptional people. But as soon as someone starts to question things or show that they're not grateful to be an American, we're like, what's the deal? I mean, I know things were bad, but can't we just move on? If you could just get with the program, you'd be accepted just fine. Sure enough, when people don't just get with the program and assimilate into white supremacy culture, they're labeled in all sorts of awful ways that are really just a projection of ourselves. And worst of all, their lives are constantly in danger. So until we do the work of dismantling white supremacy culture within us, no amount of being not will do.
Well, it's about time they start saying it. At least they're admitting it now. They are not saying anything that we didn't know, but maybe now that they are saying it and admitting to this, those of them in the back that have wax in their ear would actually listen because we know how they are, we know how they get. When we say it, it's a problem. When we say it, they tag us ready to desist. And this is why I like that in his video he mentioned how they project a lot, right? Because if you look at how they have historically tagged us, it's insane how, if you pay attention, they are actually talking about themselves. Like when they call us savages, for example, and I'm like, bro, you guys are the ones who went around the globe acting like savages. Now you are calling us savages, like the irony. Or when they call us ready to desist for, talking about race to desism and fighting against race to desism. They're like, oh, you are a race to desist for, doing what you are doing. Like, man, you guys are the ones who uplift race to desism. You have a whole system that backs it up and funds it and keeps it alive and thriving. Hell, you guys invented race to desism. But the people who are trying to dismantle all of this system, all of this insanity, they are the race to desist. Or is it when they say, oh, black people are lazy? You guys did not even build your countries on your own. You guys had to, enslave people to build your countries. You guys sat back and were sipping tea while other people were doing the work, but you want to come out and talk about how these people are the lazy ones. Like, huh? All these black people are committing crimes, they are criminals. It cannot be you, a descendant of colonizers, saying that. No, it cannot be you. You are a descendant from a long line of international criminals. You are a descendant of terrorists. And your politicians in 2023 are international terrorists. They are terrorizing nations globally. But of course, let them tell it. It's black people or the Mexicans or whoever they want to call the criminals that are the criminals, not them. No, not them. Oh, these people are looting. You see them online talking about how, they call black people looters. You people freaking have museums. You people freaking have museums where you proudly showcase your looted items, your stolen items. You guys are proud thieves. You guys are proud of your thievery and proud of your, criminality. Oh, these immigrants are coming to our countries, they're crossing the borders. First of all, they don't want to talk about how they've historically been destabilizing those immigrants' countries. They never want to talk about why immigrants are coming into their countries and who's responsible for the state these immigrants' countries are in. Because having these conversations would mean that they would have to admit that they are the ones who are destabilizing the countries of these immigrants, and they are the reason why these immigrants are leaving their countries and coming over to theirs. But I digress, right? They want to complain about immigrants are coming into our countries. Like they themselves are not immigrants, talking about the ones who are in US, Canada, Australia, and the rest of them, right? Like they are not occupying stolen lands. Like they are supposed to naturally be there. Calling every other groups of people illegal immigrants, like they aren't the first group of illegal immigrants the world ever saw. Oh, they are coming in boats, they are crossing the oceans illegally to come here. Like you guys did not do exactly what people are complaining about right now. You guys literally crossed the ocean in boats to illegally go occupy someone else's land without their consent, without their permission. They didn't want you there. You stayed by force, unalive them so you can take over their lands. Like, be for real. Like, they are immigrants talking about other immigrants. How about everybody just go back to their indigenous homes? So European Americans go back to Europe, European Canadians go back to, Europe, European Australians go back to Europe, and leave these lands for the indigenous people, since, we don't want immigrants here, right? How about everybody go back home? Yeah, let's do that. Let them tell it. Just let them tell it. They are the saints. They've never done anything wrong. All they have ever achieved, they got through hard work. They are the inventors. They didn't steal anybody's inventions. It's just crazy. Bunch of walking, breathing, bathing. I don't know about the bathing, but once in a while bathing. So yeah. Just a bunch of living, breathing, water drinking projectors. good thing for the two people at the beginning of this video who are at least, telling the truth. It's about time they too start putting in this work because they created this insanity. It's only fair that they too should put in the work to dismantle this rubbish we have going, because it's quite a sad world we live in. It's quite a sad world we live in. I don't know what the universe had planned for this world, but I know for a fact that this one right now, what's going on, definitely wasn't the plan. I don't know what the plan was, but I know this wasn't it.
So many white people are scared shitless that white Americans will be in the minority. If we have equality, why does it matter? I'm white. I'm fine being a white minority. I'm actually kind of excited to be in the minority. We'll finally have some food that's highly seasoned. Finally some new and exciting Christmas songs. Sorry, Bing Crosby, but there's more to the world. Real Latino food, not this white people walking taco Band-Aids that aren't just in my skin color. Lots of fun names besides Ryan. And I think women of all minorities should get in an elevator with white people and clutch their purse just to be an asshole.
Wow. Well, let me start by saying this has been really interesting. And I just tell you, I'm just blown away because some people, people like to deny, they like to talk around, they don't want to deal with it. And then if it's someone coming from the opposite of this person, coming from what their experience is, as the opposing group, they say that they race baiting, they say that they stirring up trouble, they say that it ain't that bad, and things like that. And so I had to lay down the facts, and pretty much some things I said in past videos covers what the facts was. And now you see the truth is coming forth. And I'm just blown away. As a real black person, you ain't got to say a word because the truth is coming forth that everybody gonna see. Everybody. And I know that it must be a sign of God, because you got people just coming out the woodwork, just telling what it really is. Because usually some people want to keep that hush hush. They don't want it to go that far, And I'm just like, wow. You don't have to say anything, or this guy is just making a big deal out of it. You hearing it from white people themselves saying what they was told and what they were taught. You heard it from the white people themselves. Everything I've been thinking, everything I've been planning, it's just that, man, just to say that I ain't a person that just said things in the past on video just to be saying it. That's why I said you had to hear truth for itself. And I had another video, but I guess I probably put up another time, where you have some white women admitted that they're really jealous of black women's hair. Yeah, you get white women staring at other white women who are jealous of black women. So you're a black woman, you go, yeah, this probably won't surprise you, but the ones that don't, oh yeah. Like I said, people, and then you have two faces of people. You got the ones that will smile in your face, and they're the indirect racist people. What they do is they don't come out directly. They try to put words in a way that you don't understand, because you won't catch on what they're saying unless you are heightened to what they're saying. And black people are very, very observant. When you catch what they kind of throw themselves, they might say something. Well, I see that your people are not very put in a sense like you're not equally intelligible and things like that. And the case I can think about is when my friend went to court, John. And I probably mentioned this on the case that his son got harmed by one of these workers, and it was on court TV, and I showed the video, but I didn't tell you what he told me afterward. But I said, yeah, I saw it on video, man. What happened? And I swear to you, this woman said this to him because he went to testify in testimony. She said, she was supposed to be the prosecuting these people. She said she was mad, and I was like, why is she mad? Because he had the evidence and everything to prove that he trying to put these people in jail for what they did to his son. She got mad and told him and his wife this: you speak too eloquent. You speak too eloquent. I'm like, what? You speak too eloquent? Because he just education. You have a lot of some white people that think that black people, who when they speak, they're too elegant. And see, I said, John, you know that's racist, right? Well, she just said that. And he said, yeah, he told her boss about that, and her boss was kind of like, he kind of shook it off and just kind of laughed about it. But he eventually got another prosecutor. But it's like she was dragging her feet trying to prosecute these defendants. And it's like, and what it is, and see, what happened was the case was in a little city called Warren, Ohio. And what happens is you have a lot of white people that deal with inner city chill people. So they think that by their grammar or by the way they talk, they're not too very intelligent. So that's why she said something like that. But when she didn't, not all black people don't have bad grammar or bad speaking skills, so to speak. See, that's another thing that they do, and that they kind of talk around. And my friend, he was raised. We went to school in the suburbs, so we understand completely. And that doesn't matter because there's some people in the city that are smart, but it's a perception of how in the closet some white people are, that they will speak like that. They really do. They think that you're less intelligent. And like I said, that's just an example. And even though, like the woman said, black people invented things because they want to keep thinking that black people are less intelligent. We gave them this. So they didn't invent all this. They didn't invent the things that they said. Yeah, they invented this again, but they do it. They tried to erase the past so they could put themselves as the present. They do it. They even do that with the Bible. That's why they give you, when they tell the story, and I know it's this. You ever notice that they don't tell you the actual people, what the actual scriptures describe what they, that in this, and the person who was writing, who was telling his story, that came through 10 different writers telling you, like for example, Job, my skin felt like it was burnt as black as coal, and it was one session like that. Then they telling you, but when you look into the movies describing these biblical characters, they're all European looking and Greek looking. Even your main characters. And even clearly when you read the Bible, it don't look like, but they give you the image. They want to control the image. And then the image go over. And that's how the images was pushed in Christianity. They don't show you the actual image. But when they want to tell you Christ, they give you Caesar Borgia. They don't tell you about, and if they give you a Christ that's coming to the earth one day, they don't give you the one that's give you the one in Revelation or the book of Daniel. They have to whiten them up. Yeah. Feet like brass, and then if you tell them what John seen, the being in heaven had feet like dark brass that were burnt brass. Oh, you know what they would say? Oh, that's a metaphor. That's how deep it is. That's how deep it is. It's a metaphor. Well, John said, well, at the time and they said it was a mistranslation or something like. They'll say something like that because they want to control the image. That's the truth. So knowing that black people are one of the people that's spiritual, that's just in us. That's in our DNA. But yeah, see, and sooner or later it's gonna come down the line. Somebody gonna say it. And it's gonna probably be somebody white that tell you. It's white people that told you that they saw truth. They saw what the Bible is. They saw the truth. I play video. One guy, pastor named We Woke, Pastor Kelly. He's actually, there are white people telling you what they read the scripture. They said, wait a minute, let me go back on here. Then they saw who black people really were. Not that they trying to get clicks and views. They saw truth. There's a spirit of truth going in the land. They're going from all walks of life. But you see, America in the Western world wants to keep the totem pole up when it comes to even in spiritual things. In every phases of life, it's got to be the people on top and the people that are about based on a color of skin, not because of qualifications. And that's why I had to Miss Jane point out bluntly, perfectly. I know a lot of people don't agree with certain things about her, but she had to give you, and she's telling you the truth, how some people really think. You have to hear from the people. That's why I said they have said things to her in front of her as a white person from other white people to give you the mind of what they're telling you. And some people white people don't like that because they want to conserve. You're stirring up trouble. You're exaggerating things. That's what they tell her. They even threaten her. Yeah. But you got to see, I guess the truth ain't about color, but it's the people who wants to keep the system going. And she's exposing it. And she from a little town. I think she's from Iowa somewhere. She come out of a town was predominantly white, so she know how living in a predominantly white town, how white people thought. That's why she talked about her father, because he was raised with that. And she was telling the truth. If you didn't know, if you white, you know, you must. It's a miracle, or you must have been educated. That's true. That's very true. What she said, because some people subconsciously they have taught this to their children, and some people and there's some people that put their kids out that never been around other races of people. There are white people that never have children that never been. That's why when you go into the air, they look at you like. Because look at the demographic of people they're used to seeing. The only time they see the demographic of people is on TV or when they go out in the mainstream public. But some places are still like that. Don't mean that everybody in the town is like that, but that's what it is. You are used to what your environment is, and when people get into a collective environment, if a topic like that comes out where somebody's doing something wrong. That is the opposite skin color and race, that's when you find out. They'll say something out of whack. That's when you find out. And like I said in a previous video, only a white person would hear. And thank God for the ones that speak the truth and tell you. And I remember when I was down in Corbin, Kentucky, like I mentioned a while ago, and how I was dating this biracial young woman. And she trying to explain to me about, her white side family, because she got beat up and jumped down there. And there was a Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, and she was convinced that, he didn't know that she was half black. That she tried to convince me that she thought she was Greek, but she was a biracial woman. Her mother on the white side of her mother. And then when I talked to some people over the phone that were on this call list here, like a dating call list, whatever. I talked to this other female who was white, who used to live in Kentucky, in Corbin, Kentucky. She left Corbin, Kentucky, and she told me, and she knew exactly who the person was. And she said, that's why I left Kentucky, because I don't believe in that crap. Because she knew who the racist person was. That's why I said not everybody is not agreeing with race, being around racist, but sometimes they know that person because they say words. And I told you stories about one time, another time I could tell you where I'm about an hour away from Columbus. I'm in went to a little town called Lancaster. White people telling me this, how the sheriff, if a black person with a white person, they think that they're bringing in drugs. A white person told me this, and I used to drive for a transportation company. Another person told me who was white, told me, and I didn't even make up a conversation. I just said, hey, I see, you live in Lancaster. No, I don't know too much about Lancaster, Ohio. And so he was from Lancaster, Ohio. And he told me, and this was confirmation because my friend of mine told me, because years ago, she had people that a person that she knew lived in Lancaster. And do you know Lancaster, Ohio was one of the headquarters of the KKK? This came from a white man told me this. I did not know that. And then at one time I met a young woman, and I can tell her family was prejudiced, I told you about, and she was a white female with a biracial daughter. And see, they didn't want to make eye contact with me. I was just being a friend, taking over her, but they didn't even say hi to me. They didn't say, hey, how you doing? No, they just walked past me like I was a ghost. So that's another form of prejudice that they don't tell you about among white people. They will ignore you. They'd be mad. They don't even make any eye contact with you. This is what they do. But maybe your white friend won't understand that, or your white girlfriend or boyfriend. But yeah, they won't acknowledge you. That's another thing that I noticed. And it's not that, some people are shy. You know a person if they're shy or they're just reserved, and then you'll know if they just don't like black people. They don't know what to do. They give off the vibes, and they don't know that they don't know that you gonna pick that. Some people are like, well, maybe just being shy, or whatever. No, some people are just prejudiced, so they don't associate. I've been around people who supposedly that was Christians like that. Went to a person that was supposed to be the Lord, that had these experiences with heaven and God and everything, and had these folks over there, man. And they didn't want to make no conversation with me. They were from another part of outskirts of Columbus, but they wasn't used to it. And then one time they just really just kept their head down, kept to themselves. Sometimes, especially when they bring in someone, it's the opposite coming over. I'm just giving you signs of how some people are. They won't even make contact with you. They won't even make eye contact with you. And they don't directly. It's prejudice. That's not a direct. That's what I call the indirect prejudice. That there's some people, and maybe like I said, the person who is your friend or associate, whatever. They're not gonna see this. They're not gonna see it. You're gonna see it because they don't reflect it at you. I've had that experience. I said, man, I thought these people were supposed to love God. I thought we all are Christ. Yeah, Christ gotta look like them. But Christ don't come for the other people. Because if you're a believer in Christ, you're not going to act like that. If you have experience with Jesus, you don't act like that. Some people tell it with their actions. They'll put on the face all day long. And that's why some people, and it could be in some aspects, don't go to church. Because you got too many phony people. And it's sad, but there are some churches like that. There's some people who supposed to be Christians are like that. And it's something deep rooted that only the Spirit of God can reveal. He will show you over time. So I hope you enjoyed the video, but yeah, just want to educate you on how people are waking up speaking the truth. They can't hide it, they deny it no more. They can't hide in the closet. But for the people who are non-white, now you see. Now you see. And I'm just giving you some tips on what you're going to experience. If you ever see it, come across it. It can be in a sarcastic, or they'll have you say something like, and you can tell if someone legit if they ask you a question, whatever your nationality is, but sometimes they do it sarcastically. And once they find out what race you are, you piss them off, they're going to call you out your name in that race. Yeah, see, that's one thing about America we don't want to talk about. Because everybody got it. We got people that we know of every nationality, but you got some people that know how to call a nationality out their name, to put a stigma on them. That's real talk right there. That's why people say, what are you? Where you come from? You got an accent, whatever. Where you from? You know why some people do that? It's like, why? I'm a human being. What's up? What's up? And if you don't be mixed with something, don't be mixed with something. Don't be mixed half and half exotic with mixed with a texture, or you're black, or you're white, or you're brown, because subconsciously, what race you gonna stand on? I know it's stupid, but that's a hidden thing in America they don't tell you. See, with all the different nationalities of people here, you're gonna come one day, and I hope it don't happen, but you're gonna come across some individual when you get to a certain setting. Trust me. Like I say, here's my mindset. You may think I'm sounding crazy, it may sound off the wall, but live long enough and go in different places. Sometimes it can where you work at, where you go to school at, and when you go into a different city, a different environment, you will see it come at you in some form or fashion. That's a tip. Sometimes some people ain't always direct with it. Get out of here! You call you out, whatever name it is. Sometimes it's kind of subtle with it. It's like a snake. Some people, and that individual can be just like a snake. And they put things in code that they speak that you don't think that you know, because you don't speak the language and your complexion is dark. People do that too, because they think that they got that's that superiority mindset. I'm just dropping game to you, that's all. Just giving you a hint. But when you come across the vision and said, and you're going to experience this by yourself. It may be by yourself. But sometimes with a person who looks like the vast majority of the people, they're going to kind of watch their words. And it's, you around one of those people. But if someone who's not prejudiced, or who's not biased, they acknowledge you both. Or they're friendly. You'll know. Just keep on living and learning. I'm just here to just give you some game. That's how that's I call it the other side of America. And American is. The American you don't know about. Some people with their mindset. You put them under pressure, you find out what they're really about. But alright then, ladies and gentlemen, hope you enjoyed the video. Hope it's been educating, enlightening, and teach your children, like Miss Jane said, educate them. Educate the people around you. that's the only way we're gonna solve the problems in this world. Because other than that, and don't judge a human being by his color or their education or their status. See by their character. Remember, you want nobody, whatever you want nobody to do to you, what you've done to them. So don't do, so vice versa, you know what I'm saying. Alright then. You guys are blessed. Until next time, see you on the next video. And like and subscribe. See you again. Take care.